If there was one political principle that was ubiquitous during the founding period, it was the natural, unalienable rights of the colonist. Gary Porter. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As most Americans will recognize, these are words from the Declaration of Independence. Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, in his beautiful and insightful book, The Founder's Key, The Divine and Natural Connection Between the Declaration and the Constitution and What We Risk by Losing It, writes, quote, "The founders understood the Declaration and Constitution to be connected, to supply together the principles and the details of government to be a persuasive and durable unity." Most Americans have never encountered Thomas Jefferson's first draft of the Declaration and are not aware that the Declaration went through significant wordsmithing on its path to approval on July 4, 1776. In his draft, I particularly preferred Jefferson's more powerful, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable," to the final self-evident. On the other hand, other sentences in Jefferson's draft clearly benefited from the collaboration of the Congress, even while Jefferson later complained his work had been mangled. The judgment of historian Carl Becker was that Congress left the Declaration better than it found it. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Here Jefferson is, of course, referring to the certain unalienable rights we have been endowed by our Creator. These natural and unalienable rights derive from natural law. In his 1775 newspaper essay entitled "The Farmer Refuted," Alexander Hamilton explains the relationship between natural law and natural rights this way, quote, "To grant that there is a supreme intelligence who rules the world and has established laws to regulate the actions of his creatures, and still to assert that man, in a state of nature, may be considered as perfectly free from all restraints of law and government, appears to a common understanding altogether irreconcilable. Good and wise men in all ages have embraced a very dissimilar theory. They have supposed that the Deity, from the relations we stand in to himself and to each other, has constituted an eternal and immutable law, which is indispensably obligatory upon all mankind prior to any human institution whatever. This is what is called the law of nature. Upon this law depend the natural rights of mankind. The sacred rights of mankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written, as with a sunbeam, in the whole volume of human nature, by the hand of the divinity itself, and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power." Indispensably obligatory. Sir William Blackstone explains why, quote, "Man considered as a creature must necessarily be subject to the laws of his Creator, for he is entirely a dependent being. A being independent of any other has no rule to pursue, but such as he prescribes to himself. But a state of dependence will inevitably oblige the inferior to take the will of him of whom he depends as the rule of his conduct, not indeed in every particular, but in all those points wherein his dependence consists. This principle, therefore, has more or less extent and effect in proportion as the superiority of the one and the dependence of the other is greater or less, absolute or limited. And consequently, as a man depends absolutely on his Maker for everything, it is necessary that he should at all points conform to his Maker's will." End quote. If there was one political principle that was ubiquitous during the founding period, it was the natural, unalienable rights of the colonist. Early Americans almost never missed an opportunity to proclaim them. As Thomas West argues, quote, "The founders shared a theoretically coherent understanding of politics rooted in natural rights philosophy." End quote. While Jefferson directly lists only 3 unalienable rights, other rights, both individual and collective, are hidden in plain sight. These include the right of a people to, quote, dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, end quote. The right to, quote, to alter or to abolish an old government and institute new government, end quote. Note this right can always be seen as a duty. The right to secure their unalienable civil rights through the institution of government. The right to delegate power to government through the people's consent. We also note that Jefferson's use of the pursuit of happiness is unusual. The normal trio of essential rights was life, liberty, and property. We find property mentioned in most rights documents from the founding period. Pursuit of happiness is an outlier. John Adams, in A Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States of America, 1787, reminds us, quote, property is surely a right of mankind, as really as liberty. The moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny commence. If, quote, thou shalt not covet and thou shalt not steal were not commandments of heaven, they must be made inviolable precepts in every society before it can be civilized or made free, end quote. But as Thomas Paine warns us, quote, property will ever be unequal. Industry, superiority of talents, dexterity of management, extreme frugality, fortunate opportunities, or the opposite, or the means of those things will ever produce that effect without having recourse to the harsh, ill-sounding names of avarice and oppression. And besides this, there are some men who, though they do not despise wealth, will not stoop to the drudgery or the means of acquiring it, nor will be troubled with it beyond their wants or their independence, while in others there is an avidity to obtain it by every means not punishable. It makes the sole business of their lives, and they follow it as a religion. All that is required with respect to property is to obtain it honestly, and not employ it criminally. But it is always criminally employed when it is made a criterion for exclusive rights, end quote. Is there a relationship between property and other rights? To James Madison, there certainly was. Quote, in its larger and juster meaning, it, property, embraces everything to which a man may attach a value and have a right, and which leaves to everyone else the like advantage. In the latter sense, a man has a property in his opinion and in the free communication of them. He has a property of peculiar value in his religious opinions and in the professions and practice dictated by them. He has a property very dear to him in the safety and liberty of his person. He has an equal property in the free use of his faculties and free choice of the objects on which to employ them. In a word, as a man is said to have a right in his property, he may be equally said to have a property in his rights, end quote. Madison then explains that conscience is the most sacred of all property, more sacred than his castle. With property aside, the unalienable rights of life and liberty are relatively easy to understand, but a right to pursue happiness begs further explanation. In his first inaugural address, George Washington explained, quote, there exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, end quote. Jefferson would agree, but perhaps we should first clarify what the pursuit of happiness did not mean. To America's founders, it was not the pursuit of licentiousness, the pursuit of base pleasure, or the pursuit of wealth for wealth's sake. John Locke warns us, quote, mistake not imaginary for real happiness, end quote. The pursuit of happiness, as envisaged by John Locke and by Jefferson, was not merely the pursuit of pleasure, property, or self-interest, although it includes all of these. It is also the freedom to be able to make decisions that result in the best life possible for a human being which includes intellectual and moral effort. We would all do well to keep this in mind when we begin to discuss, quote, the American concept of happiness, end quote.
This essay was written by Gary Porter. Gary Porter is Executive Director of the Constitution Leadership Initiative.
I am Janine Turner, founder of Constituting America. I and Kathy Gillespie, Constituting America's CEO, thank you for joining us for our 13th annual 90-day study. Our annual studies are entitled 90 plus 90 equals 180. History holds the key to the future, because history does hold the key to the future, or as Shakespeare said, the past is prologue. Join us tomorrow, right back here, same bat channel, same bat time, for those of you who are as old as I and watched Batman, the TV show. Don't forget to check out our essays on American exceptionalism. It's our study from last year. If you go to the constitutingamerica.org and scroll down, you'll see the studies, and you'll see a little red button that says American Exceptionalism Study. Really good, so that we have 90 days of 90 tools in our toolbox, so that we can have a really good civil civic conversation about why America is exceptional. Have a great day. We thank Amanda Hughes for championing these wonderful studies, and for Bobby Rodriguez for editing these wonderful essays and sending them out there into the universe. Have a wonderful day.